Our problem for today is cosine of theta over 1 minus sine of theta is equal to secant of theta plus tangent of theta. So we have a verifying problem, so we want to make our left side equal our right side. So since we have a binomial in the denominator, our best chance to start off the problem is to multiply by the conjugate, which is the opposite of the denominator. So we have cosine of theta 1 minus sine of theta. So we will multiply by 1 plus sine of theta, 1 plus sine of theta, and we will list out our steps here. Multiply by conjugate. So when we do this, this is basically like this. So we have to distribute our cosine to both sides. So we get cosine of theta plus cosine of theta sine of theta over 1 minus sine squared theta. So all we did was multiply and distribute. So when we do this, we see an identity, which is we see a Pythagorean identity, which is 1 minus sine squared is equal to cosine squared. So once we see this, we can substitute it in. So so we will have cosine of theta plus cosine of theta sine of theta. So since 1 minus sine squared of theta equals cosine squared theta, we can substitute that in at the bottom. So all we did was substitute identity, and if we list out that identity is 1 minus sine squared theta is equal to cosine squared theta. So now our next step is to factor out a cosine on both the denominator and the numerator. So cosine of theta, when we factor that out, we get 1 plus sine of theta. And since we have cosine squared on the bottom, if we factor 1 cosine out, we are still left with cosine of theta. So our cosine of theta will cancel. And if we list out our steps, we factored out a cosine and cancel. So our next step is we have to split up, since we have a monomial on the bottom now, which means we only have one term in our denominator, we can split up our problem. So we can split it up into 1 over cosine of theta plus sine of theta over cos of theta. So what we did was we split up split up our problem. And if we look at our reciprocal identities, 1 over cosine is equal to secant. So you can write that here, 1 over cosine is equal to secant. And sine of theta over cos of theta is equal to tangent. So sine of theta over cos of theta is equal to tangent. And now what we are going to do is just substitute these in. So since 1 over cos of theta is equal to secant, we can just plug in secant of theta. And since sine over cosine is equal to tangent, we can just plug that in. So all we did was substitute in identities, and now we see that this answer equals our original problem of what we were trying to equal. So we can check mark smiley face because our answer is verified.